Welcome back to the Culture Encounters podcast. I'm your host. Wait, hold on, 1 second. Much better. Welcome back to the Culture Encounter podcast. I am your host, Chad Omby, and after a little bit of a hiatus, we are back. That's right, we are back with a special Halloween episode. If you can't tell, I love Halloween. So we're going to talk about Halloween from a multicultural, international perspective today, and then we are going to read a little bit of one of the greatest poems ever written by Mr. Edgar Allan Poe. So let's go ahead and delve right into it, shall we? So Halloween actually began as a cultural pastime in Ireland. So all my information today is coming from NPR, by the way. So Halloween is known today because it originated from the ancient festival of Samhain or Samhain, which celebrated the beginning of winter in Ireland more than 2,000 years ago. It is still a major deal in Ireland. It celebrates, they have the Pusa or Puka festival, which celebrates the folklore behind the Celtic holiday, to the Derry Halloween celebration in the northern part of Ireland. Anybody from Ireland who listens to the show wants to, in the comments, let us know what Halloween is like in Ireland and your experience. Please feel free to do so. We would love that. So there have been several countries and several cultures celebrate Halloween or have a holiday around this time, other than America, right? As we've said. So in America, you have your traditions of trick or treating and Halloween parties and costumes and teenagers getting into mischief and eating all of the candy in the world and spooky movies and scary movies. Speaking of scary movies, by the way, I just watched The Exorcist for the first time, and I thought, and I might get a little bit of a, this is my maybe controversial take. I thought it was really bad. I'm not gonna lie, it was maybe the dumbest movie I've seen in a long time. And I know it's like culturally important, and I know that it's like a big deal, and I know that it like set the paradigm forward for horror movies going forward. But I don't know. Maybe it's because I wasn't there in 1973 or 72 when it came out, so like I couldn't experience like the hysteria around it. I don't know. Like I thought it was just so over the top and cheesy and unintentionally campy. Or maybe it was intentionally campy. If it was going for intentional campiness, then it was good. But I digress. Anyway, we've got those traditions in America, right? But let's look at some of the traditions of Halloween around the world. We already mentioned Ireland. Let's start by talking about Mexico. So in Mexico, they do go trick or treating, but their major holiday, it's kind of like a preview for their major holiday, El Dia de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead, which takes place the first and second. So it began in pre-Columbian Mexico, and it occurs. The belief of those who celebrate is that the gates of the afterlife open, allowing the spirit of deceased loved ones to reunite with their still living family. If you've seen the movie Coco, that's what it's about. You have all of these altars to deceased family members, right? That get to, they have these altars so they'll be remembered, and then those altars will allow the gates to open for them, and they can go be reunited with their still living family. So that's probably one of the more well known ones. Um, but it's a wonderful, I think, opportunity to remember those who have left us. England also does one. Uh, it's overshadowed by another larger event, kind of like Mexico, but this one is Guy Fawkes Day. Remember the 5th of November, if you're familiar with Guy Fawkes Day. It is, it's a famous poem based on it. Um, and also the movie V for Vendetta is about that. So, it's about the failed assassination of a king by Guy Fawkes, and his the holiday is celebrated, around England, I guess, as a way to fight against tyranny and oppression would be my guess. Would be the reason for celebrating Guy Fawkes Day. Uh, Instead of, oh, I didn't know this. Instead of trick or treating for candy, children are going to walk around asking for a penny for for Guy Fawkes. And they also have bonfires. So in Italy, they celebrate All Saints, or a festival with deep religious undertones. It's dedicated to all of the saints as a whole. The celebration is varied by region. In Sicily, um, they the belief is that the deceased rise from their graves to bring gifts to well-behaved children, and then they basically go trick or treating in Sardinia. In Rome, they actually eat near the gravesites of loved ones. Very dark, but also uplifting in a way of connecting with those that have passed on. That common theme we're getting. In Guatemala, they also honor the dead during the first couple days of November. During the Barriletes Gigantes, or Giant Kites Festival, uh, these kites that go up to 40 feet in the air are hand painted and flown over the graves of loved ones who have passed away. They represent a bridge between the living and dead, kind of like the gate in Mexico's Day of the Dead. Again, that similar theme of reconnecting, right? Reconnecting with those who have passed on. Almost seems like a macabre way, but a way to deal with grief in a lot of ways. I think it'd be really interesting to see those kites. So I'm going to do some Googling after this. If we have any listeners from Guatemala, please feel free to chime in on the on social media, on the YouTube, on direct, wherever you end up seeing the podcast. Please let us know what you see, or if you've ever been a part of this festival, the Giant Kites Festival. And then finally, in Japan, we have um, we have the new holiday. It's relatively new in Japan. The country is embracing new Western traditions, but they're also adding their own influence. So it becomes like an amalgamation of Western traditions and Japanese traditions. There are other holidays in Japan, one called Oban, that are meant for celebrating the deceased. So trick or treating isn't as popular there. Um, what basically, so it's more about the adults than it is about the kids in Japan. So it's all about the costumes. They'll dress in costumes and they'll go to parties or clubs. So another conversation that myself and Amma had, and I'm going to bring this up to her in our next podcast that we're actually recording later this evening. Uh, in certain places in other cultures, Halloween is not celebrated. In fact, it's somewhat taboo. I remember asking her about that recently, and we discussed about how in Ghana Halloween, when I don't know about now. I'll have to ask her. But when she was growing up, Halloween was not something that was celebrated. It was seen as actually very taboo. The imagery involved with it, like witches and ghosts and spirits, were not seen as something to they were not seen as something to dress up as, or embrace as part of their culture. So that's very interesting to me, that something that is so ingrained in American culture and Western culture may not be everywhere. And I think it's important to remember that, and respect that as well. Everybody has their own different culture and their own different celebrations and traditions, and things that are deemed appropriate and not appropriate. So what might be appropriate for me and you may not be appropriate for another culture. And I think that's a really important part of understanding our differences as cultures. So with that being said, one of my things that I love to do on a Halloween is recognize a fellow Virginian. Uh, slash Baltimorean, I guess, Mr. Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe, for those that do not know from other cultures, is one of the most now, not necessarily during his lifetime, but now is one of the most prolific writers of not only poetry but also stories. He is often credited with inventing the modern detective story. Um, that he's often credited with inventing the gothic horror story, um, along with others, but really like perfecting it. I guess Mary Shelley technically was before him, but I think he is credited, like I said, with perfecting it. Uh, he also is credited with the science fiction story. In the 1800s, kind of being like the grandfather of all of these genres that are now commonplace now. And again, he wasn't like many artists celebrated as much during his lifetime, but in many recent in the recent 100 years or so, he's been celebrated as one of the greatest writers of all time. Um, and now, in honor of Halloween, we are going to go ahead and we're going to read arguably his magnum opus, his most famous poetic work, The Raven. Let me get my reading voice on, see if I can master the rhythm of this because it has a very specific rhythm. Let me see how we do. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I had sought to borrow from my book surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden who the angels named Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. So that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. 'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This is it, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more." Deep into that darkness peering along, I stood there wandering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore." This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, someone louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window, Lettice. Let me see, then, where thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, in this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obsessance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with men of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered. Still I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, Nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken. Doubtless, said I, what it utters it is only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore. But the raven still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking, Nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fairy eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head in ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining, and the lamplight gloated over, but whose velvet violet lining and the lamplight gloating over she shall press, nevermore. Then, methought, the air grew denser, perfumed with the unseen censer, swung by seraphim, whose footfalls tinkled on the tuft floor. Wrench, I cried, thy guide hath lent thee. By these angels he hath sent thee respite in them from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff this kind of nepenthe, and forget the lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, Nevermore. Prophet, said I, the thing of evil prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee hath here ashore, desolate, yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm of Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, Nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil prophet still, or bird or devil, that by heaven or bends above us by God, by that God we both adore. Tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aden it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whose the angels named Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden, who the angels named Lenore. Quoth the raven, Nevermore. Be that word of our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting, get thee back until the tempest of the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token, or if lie thou shalt hath spoken, leave my loneliness unbroken, quit that bust above my door, take thy beak out from out my heart, and take thy form from out my door. Quoth the raven, Nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamp light over him streaming shows his shadow on the floor. And my soul, from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor, shall be lifted nevermore. Thank you for listening today and allowing me to read one of my favorite poems. It's very dark and very creepy, but also very poetic, in my opinion. Um, I hope you enjoy Halloween if you celebrate. I hope you do something tonight or today or this past weekend that you enjoy with your family, if you can. And if you celebrate, if you do not, I hope you are doing something equally as enjoyable for you. Thank you, and I'll see you guys next time.